Good evening, everybody. I'm going to give it just a minute while we let folks log on for our very exciting webinar that we have tonight. This is a fun one for me, and I'll share why in just a minute. Give it just a few minutes to see folks logging on. And this is being recorded. So we will have the Q&A open for those who are logging on live. You'll be able to ask questions in our Q&A this evening. So if there are questions that you have for our panelists throughout the conversation, feel free to throw them into the Q&A and I will pass those on to them. But the chat is closed, so please just use the Q&A for any kinds of questions that you have. So. Okay, I think I'm going to just go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to our Estrela Star Pass webinar series. I'm excited about this particular topic, but even more excited about our guests today. I'm Christina Dooley. I am the founder of Estrela Consulting, and I am really excited because this evening we're going to be talking about pathways to careers in professional theater. And our guests this evening are actually people that I have known for a very long time. I won't say how long, ladies. I won't do that for us. But I have known them since childhood and am so incredibly impressed with where they are now. And I myself, as many people do, you lose touch with people that you knew from your adolescence. And I am actually also just selfishly curious to hear about their journeys to where they are now. I followed them from afar, but I'm excited to have them with us tonight. So without further ado, I am going to go ahead and introduce our guests, Jodi, Dominick, and Colleen Longshaw Jackson. I'm going to have them go ahead and introduce themselves and just tell you just a small bit about them before we jump into some of the Q&A. So Jodi, you want to go ahead?
Oh, sure. Everybody, my name is Jodi Dominick. Oh, there we go. Hi, I'm Jodi Dominick. I am a professional actress. I'm from Euclid, Ohio, and I'm currently right now in Idaho, of all places, working at the Idaho Shakespeare Festival. I'm doing a production of Natasha, Pierre, and the Great Comet of 1812.
Exciting times. Yeah. We'll jump more into the more details. So hang tight, everybody. Yeah. Colleen, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Colleen Longshaw. If you're looking up acting things, Colleen Longshaw. And I'm also a professional actress. I have lived in New York, toured, and done a bunch of regional things around the country. I am currently living in my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, and I still perform while I'm here. I also have what I would call a day job, working as the Chief Diversity Officer for the city of Shaker Heights, but I'm excited to be here.
Thank you both. So I spoke with both of our guests before we went live, and I shared with them a little bit about the why behind this webinar series. A few months ago, just in discussions with my colleagues and other school counselors and independent counselors, we found that we had families that were interested in really learning almost the behind the scenes stories of people who were working in careers and professions that a lot of people, I think, have misperceptions about how you get to do those things. What do the pathways look like? And one of them that has come up quite a bit over time is our careers in theater and professional theater and musical theater. And I think that's something that I myself have worked with several students who've gone on to study in musical theater and theater programs and the college and university space. But I think there is a lot of value in hearing from people who've actually gone and done that and then moved into professional work in this space. So the first question I want to ask both of you is I'd love to hear a little bit about your why you ended up deciding to study theater in the college setting. And also you can share where you went, because I shared your bios in the registration information for tonight, but maybe sharing why you chose the program that you did. Colleen, why don't you go first for this question?
Sure. In terms of the why I decided to go into theater, I guess it changes as I get older, right? I love telling stories. I always have. I came from a singing family, so I've had that gift kind of naturally. And when I started to study Shakespeare in my high school English courses, I kind of just fell in love. So there was multiple reasons that made me interested in theater. And when it was time for college, I considered going to the Air Force. And then I thought, you know what? I think I want to be an actor in real life. And so I wanted to be trained to do that. So I found some schools that I wanted to go to, and I just auditioned for the theater program. So that's how I chose to do it, because I had a passion that grew probably from the time I was 9 or 10.
And I can tell you, those watching this, I had the honor and privilege of being in at least 1 or 2 productions, maybe 3 with at least Colleen, maybe. We were in Pippin, Pajama Game, and Fiddler on the Roof. I think those were the 3. Are those the 3 that come to mind?
Those are the 3 that we did together. Yes.
Okay.
Jodi Dominick here was the lead in at least 2 of those. So we had a good time. And Pippin, we won't tell those stories. Those stories.
So Jodi, so obviously we just heard you had a lead, in at least one play. So tell us, how did you choose this path, and where did you go to school?
Yeah, I similar to Colleen, I just kind of came out into the world singing. I was always singing, and I just had a natural curiosity for telling stories and singing and dancing and making music videos and just making stuff at home. It was something that I just always knew I wanted to do. That's the best way that I can describe it. I didn't really have much of an interest when I was younger in a lot of other things. And my mom took me to the theater, I want to say when I was probably about 10 or 11. She took me downtown to see a children's touring show of The Secret Garden. And it wasn't even a musical, but I saw that there were young kids in it. And something just kind of sparked it in me that, oh, there's kids up there that are my age, and they're doing this on this big stage in front of all these people. And so I just always wanted to be performing, whether it was singing or I thought maybe I would be in a band or something. But I also just grew up watching musicals, movie musicals. And my mom, I was really lucky. She enjoyed the theater as well and took me to lots of different productions all over Cleveland. And I just kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do.
And one of the questions that we get all the time was for anything actually in performing arts is whether or not a degree matters or is important in terms of the training or the skills that you're learning. Maybe Jodi, can you talk about that and what your opinion is about it? I'm sure it varies by person, but especially because you've engaged with people who've probably had both pathways. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly helpful to study, to get a degree, because it's a big business of connections. And I always tell young people who are interested, I always say that if you can find a school, a training program, it depends on also what you want to do. I think, there are musical theater programs, and then within those musical theater programs, where I went to school, I went to Baldwin Wallace University, and I studied music theater at their conservatory. And so my training is, I have a Bachelor of Music in music theater. So our training was very concentrated on learning how to read music, ear training, theory, things like that. And there are other music theater programs that don't offer as much of that. But I think that what drew me in particular to the school that I went to, I had auditioned at several different schools, but what drew me to BW was that there was a connection to a professional regional theater where you could begin to make those connections in the industry in college. And a lot of those leaders that were leading Great Lakes Theater at the time when I was in school, they've all gone, they're still directing. The artistic director is an artistic director at another theater, and he has asked me to audition for him in other places. And so I think that a good program, what's helpful is because it's so concentrated when you're working in theater or music theater, from my background, it's so intense. You are studying dance, voice, acting, music. You have rehearsals. It's a very focused endeavor, because it's a craft that you work and you constantly work at it. You never stop working on it. You never stop learning. But I think it's really helpful if you're looking for colleges, universities, that they have connections to other professional theaters that can help you get that ball rolling. Do they showcase in New York? Do they showcase in Chicago or LA? Do they have those kinds of connections outside of where you're studying? But I also think that there are so many other markets. I don't think that New York and LA are the end all be all. I think Colleen and I are good examples of, we've been able to create careers in smaller markets. But I think a lot of that was because of the connections that I made going to my undergrad program.
That's I think that's a very good point, actually, Jodi, because a lot of our students, when we're working with them, immediately gravitate. I won't name schools, but there are certainly, the schools that they gravitate to because of those, I think, assumed better locations, for that they assume that maybe the location of some of these other schools, and I like mentioning kind of the secondary market type places that people should consider, because there are a lot of programs. I mean, there are a lot of what I think are really probably substantial programs in places that students don't immediately gravitate to. Colleen, what do you think in terms of other identification pieces when a student's looking at a program? Are there other things other than like the ability to attend the showcases or anything like that? Do you have any other things that you think students should really be paying attention to when they're looking at a theater program?
Absolutely. I have a different degree than what Jodi has. So I went to Kent State University and I got a bachelor's of fine arts in acting. So it was not a musical theater program. I do musical theater because I can. I had the option to take classes like that, but most of my classes were, strictly acting classes, a lot of Shakespeare, a lot of the classics, some film and TV training. And I think what that taught me was that you really want to look at a school that has what you think you want to do and some other options. So I graduated from Kent State, but I teach at Baldwin Wallace now. I'm an adjunct professor there in the musical theater program. And you have to think about what are the other things you might be interested in doing. A conservatory program is super concentrated and they don't really have an option to do a bunch of other things. I went to a school where, although it was just as intense in terms of rehearsals and shows and it was also a liberal arts school that had a lot of other things that I could be involved in. And it wasn't as concentrated of a program. Now, it depends on what kind of learner you are and how you thrive and what you think you might need. You should also look at the shows that they've done for the last 5 years, because musical theater and theater school is a lot more popular than it was when Jodi and I were in school. And so you want to look at what is the demographic makeup of the school. I was the only brown person at my school. So what did that result in? I played a lot of roles I'm never going to play in real life, because they didn't have the people to do a show that I would be in when I went to New York. If I were sending my student to a school now, I would say, what is the demographic makeup of that particular program that you're looking at, and what does that diversity look like, and is there a space for you? Do they do things that you can be involved in? And you want to make sure you know that. Look at some of the graduates and what they've done. Now that we live in this social media age, usually most schools post all the people who graduated from their schools. Look at the kinds of things that they're doing now, and that's something that I would consider when you're thinking about a program. What is that audition process like? There's so many things to consider, but if you're a theater student looking for a school, so those are some of the immediate things that I would talk about. you should decide whether or not you want to be in a conservatory program or something that allows you more opportunity for exploring. You should look at what they've done. You should look at the teachers and the professors that you're going to have, what kind of careers that they have before they became professors. You can get a professor who's only ever taught. If you come to other schools, you'll get a professor who's directed all across the country, and they bring that expertise with them to your education, and all the connections that are attached to a person who's worked in the field instead of only taught in the field. Both have value, but you just need to look and think about what you want to do, where you want to be, and where does it look like people who graduate from here go from here.
I want to bottle that up into like a little sound bite and just keep hitting repeat. And I have to tell you, I love your point about the diversity of the programs. And I'll put a plug in for anybody. If you have not listened to the audiobook version of Billy Porter's memoir, you should absolutely do it. He talks about going to Carnegie Mellon, the same thing, and talking about what kinds of opportunities there were or were not for him. As an actor of color going it very, very eye-opening. But thank you. And also thank you for mentioning the faculty piece, Colleen, because I think that's super important to know what are their credentials as well. Because that can really, I think, play a very significant part in your experience as a student. So thinking about if let's say you were on the other side and you were the ones auditioning students for your program. You were, you do work in a program, Colleen, but if you were the one there, what would you be looking for in an applicant? Someone who is like Jodi, maybe from a conservatory standpoint, what would you be looking for?
I think, you're looking for, well, a lot of it sort of depends on what they're looking for specifically in each program. But I think that when you are auditioning, they're looking for skill, what your skill level is, and and a little bit about your experience, but you're young. And so there's not a lot of, I don't think, expectation on, what your skill level is, because you're there to learn. But I think if you, are you somebody that can be comfortable being uncomfortable? Because I think that this is a business where you're not always comfortable. Are you a yes and person? Are you somebody that can kind of roll with things? Can you take direction? What is your, just can you be, I guess, teachable, but also bring who you authentically are as a person, where you are? Can you also bring that into the room? Can you bring that into the program? Can you bring that into your roles? So I guess those are some of the things that I think thinking about, because there can be some stability in it, but really you're kind of going where the jobs are. You're traveling a lot. You're living, out of suitcases, and you are really nomadic in life, and you're always looking for the next job. You're always auditioning. You're always taking classes. You're always making those connections. So do you have a good work ethic? What's your work ethic like? Do you show up and do your work? Because it's one thing to be cast in a show and you just kind of show up to do your performance, but how are you performing in your classes? Do you bring equal value to that? And are you a team player? Because theater making, I think artistry in general, creative people, everybody works differently. Some people like to work alone, but acting theater is a collaborative sport. And so are you someone who is going to be fun and collaborative and kind of going to bring who you authentically are into the program, with also some room for growth as well?
Those are really, really, really good points. I love the phrase, it's a collaborative sport. I like that. Colleen, is there anything that you feel like high school students who are interested in potentially applying for programs where they may have an audition, or there may be a more rigorous application process to be admitted into the program. Is there anything students should be doing now as, 9th, 10th, probably by 12th grade, it may be too late to be prepping, but is there anything that you like when you meet with students that you say that's something that they did that made them successful at the college level in a program like this? Is there anything like that?
Yeah, and it's tricky. And this is going to be a little odd, but it is tricky, right? So it is a lot more competitive now than it used to be because musical theater is super popular. And so what happens is your kids who have a lot of resources and a lot of advantages get a lot of training before, and when they're younger, they get a lot of dance classes and vocal classes, and they've done a lot. So they show up a little bit more polished. And sometimes the kids who just really like it and, they're comparing themselves too much. And so what I would say is whatever you have access to, access it. If you do not come from a lot of money or a lot of opportunity for people to put you through classes, then you should be auditioning for the things in your community that you can be a part of, because you learn by doing as well. You should be taking advantage of all of the resources within your school. Do you have a choir at your school? Can your choir director give you extra material? Like, one of the things that an actor has to be, Jodi talked about how nomadic we are, but you have to figure it out because you're kind of like an organization of one. And so you have to show up, you have to present yourself, you have to be ready. And at the end of the day, they're not going to ask how much help you had to get ready. They're going to pick the person who they feel is the best for it. So I always factor in when I'm auditioning people that some people may come a little bit more polished than the other, but what is it that they really have? And so what I tell kids is that, and young people who are auditioning for schools, we are looking for potential, not perfection. If you're perfect, then you don't need us, right? So when you show up to an audition, we're looking for potential. We want to see someone that's coachable. So get into these shows and doing as much as you can while you're in high school. You're going to take a lot of direction. You're going to get a lot of criticism. Can you take criticism? What we also don't want to see is just a robot or being just like everyone else. Oh, this is the most popular song, I'm going to sing it. This is the most popular outfit, I'm going to wear it. Because we don't need that. That exists. What do you bring and what do you offer that's unique? So I tell high school kids to start to figure out, what is that thing you're specifically good at? What is that thing that brings you the most joy and makes you stand out? And be able to, one, articulate it and talk about it, but then present it. And I think that's important. So that's what I say you do. You take all the opportunities that you can. Jodi knows I had when I did Pajama Game, I wasn't going to do it because I had an issue with the director and I was like, this is not right. And, and it was a whole bunch of drama. And my mom said something to me, do you want to act? And if you do, is it more important to be in a show, even if it's not the role you want, or not to do it at all? And I went ahead and did it because I knew that it would build something in me, and it did. And you have to be willing to do some of those things. If you're a person who's not going to do it, if you don't get the role you want, a theater program in a school is not for you, because you're not always going to be in the show, let alone have the exact role that you want. So you have to be able to be a team player. You cannot be a lead if you cannot be in an ensemble, not in any program that I run, because you have to have that kind of personality that's willing to let other people shine and then be ready to shine when the light is on you. So those are the kind of characteristics you should be developing while you're in high school. Those are the type of chances you should be taking, opportunities you should be seeking out, and really utilizing all the tools and resources you have access to.
It sounds like it's a good idea for those folks to kind of check their ego, that if there's that, and I like that. And I actually, before we went live, I was telling Colleen and Jodi that my daughter auditioned for a production in middle school last year and did not get a lead part or anything close to it, but she was an important part. And we talked about that, about how important every single role is in the production. It's a full cast production, and you have to sometimes take those ensemble parts. If you have a love of acting, that's how you're probably going to gain experience, obviously learn the craft, all of those things. So what do you wish somebody, so you mentioned like your nomadic life. Is there anything about your lives in this space that you wish somebody would have told you? Like, is there something that was totally like, caught you off guard about being a professional actor?
I think I think it was going from a very contained sort of space where you have your days structured and you've got, you get up at 8 and you've got your classes and you do this. And once you're out into the world, like Colleen said, you are a one-person operation. You are your own business. You are a business owner. You are responsible. We're kind of independent contractors. You might sign with an agent or a manager, and all of that is incredibly useful. But I guess I didn't understand until I moved to New York City shortly after I graduated. I was in a show after I graduated college and I got my equity card and I joined the union and I moved to New York, and I knew I was realistic about it. I knew that there was a lot of competition. I knew I was going to have to get a day job to bring in income until my acting jobs, started to come in. But I think the idea that you are the one that is doing all of your advertising for yourself, and you've got to schedule yourself, and you've got to figure out all the money. And so I think that treating yourself as, obviously you're a human being and all of that, but treating yourself as though you are a business. I don't think I really understood that until I was out into the world, trying to make my way. That's one thing that I wish, but in a way, I don't know if I could have learned that until I actually got out there. But that's one thing that I would say I wish I knew more about before I left.
Do you think more people now entering the profession have a better sense of that because of social media, and because many of them maybe are already curating their brand before they ever get to, I don't know if that's true or not, but I just wonder, obviously that, not to date us, but that didn't exist when we, you were hustling to get your roles and all of that, you didn't have that kind of presence already, I guess. So, Colleen, anything you wish you would have known or somebody would have told you about this?
Oh, there's so much. But if I think about what I wish I had known just as an individual person who has to show up and you present yourself to be judged every time you go, and people usually do a couple job interviews in their lifetime. Every time you get a job, you are going to present yourself. And I think after about 3 or 4 years, I started to compare myself. And I think it did something to me that was unfortunate. And I feel like it stole some time, because when you start to do that, you diminish that unique quality that you bring. And I wish someone had told me that is what is the most special thing about me, is what's different than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do theater as a kid. I didn't really do theater till I got to high school. I was going to be a doctor. So then I said, I'll play one on TV. Right. And so I wish someone had told me that I needed to hold on to that. I found it again. I didn't let go of it for so long, but when you're in New York City and you're that fresh group of kids who just graduated and you're the new thing. Once you've been there for 3 years, there's a new group that comes in every year. And so I started to be in these big auditions with people who had gone to like Juilliard and Boston Conservatory and all these singers. And I knew that I was a natural singer, but a trained actor. And what I always stood on was, oh, Colleen, she's an actor and that's her thing. But I got insecure about my singing because I started comparing myself to my Juilliard friends and peers and, my conservatory trained musical people. And what I do is so specific to me, and there's room for everybody, and it was that I lost a little bit of time because I kind of got lost in that. And I wish someone had noticed I was doing that and stopped me, So I tell people that all the time. Don't compare yourself. Don't compare yourself to the person next to you. They are your competition, but not really, because you're really, you want to show up as your best you every day. That's all you can bring to the table. Casting decisions are made when we go back in the room, we cast, we put those puzzle pieces together. But if you don't get cast, it's not because you weren't more like the person next to you, right? Mm-hmm. It's just that wasn't what it was for that particular thing. So I wish someone had told me that so that I would push that away when it crept in. So I tell every student that I have that every opportunity I get.
So students, if you're watching this, or counselors, if you have students or parents, share that with your team so that they can push it away earlier, maybe. So are there any myths that you either want to just stop, you would like to stop it in its track about becoming an actor, a professional actor in some way? Is there anything you hear that you're like, no, that's not actually true? Anything like that?
There's a lot. There's a lot. I mean, one thing is that, you'll tell someone you're an actor and they just, oh, well, have you been on Broadway? Or what have I seen you in? And it's like, I have not been on Broadway, but that doesn't make me less of an artist or an actor or a professional because I didn't take that route. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. People just kind of assume that, like, oh, well, would you ever consider moving? Would you ever consider being on a TV show? And it's like, well, of course, but that's just not the way that it works all the time. And even now, what's going on with the SAG-AFTRA strike, the union striking, that there's sort of this myth that a lot of the actors that you see on television or even big, Broadway stars or whatever, that they're really rich and they make a lot of money. That's just not true. There's a very, small percentage of those folks that are making the millions and millions and millions of dollars. And the rest of us are, we're like working people. And so it's kind of an interesting contrast. People either they want to put you up on this, they want to say, oh, well, you haven't done Broadway, so you're not the real deal. Or oh, you must be, because you were on a television show or you worked with this person, you must be like making the money. And so it's there's just a lot of, I think, myths about just the business in general when related to stuff like that.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Anything else, Colleen? Any myth that you'd like to bust?
Yeah, I think the myth that there's a point at which you have arrived, if that makes sense. I think that people think the learning stops, but it doesn't for us. There's always new things. There's always classes you need to take. You need to be sharpening your skills. I think even with social media, people usually only post what's great about it. But I mean, all of my friends who have been are on Broadway, even me and Jodi, but all of us, when we're working, when we're in a show, we're also auditioning for whatever comes next. It is that kind of a thing. So, there are people who get in one show and sit in it for 20 years, like your Lion Kings or the people who are in Phantom for a long time. That's just very rare. And I think some people just think that it's just all roses all the time. Yes, when I get off work, I get a standing ovation. Yes, right. But I am always seeking work. You don't sit in that security space forever. You're taking risks every time. And I think, no one really understands that you can go on 50 auditions before you get a call back to get a job. That when people are in New York, you're auditioning 3, 4, 5 times a day. I went to New York last week just to visit some friends and did 2 auditions for 12 theaters. It's constant. And I think people think that it's kind of floating by because what they see is what people post, and they just assume something. They see us in our costumes taking pictures, and it's a sacrifice. I can't tell you how many weddings I was supposed to be a bridesmaid that I couldn't be in, because I was away doing doing theater. So it is a challenge because you are kind of out there and you're at the whim of the rules of the theater. So I think that that's the myth that I would bust, that it's not continual work, that you're not continuing to try and push yourself. And you have to be a self-motivated person. I am kind of lazy. And so if I had known that I would have to do this much work to get to do the thing that I love, I might not have chosen it, to be honest. I did not know that I was going to I thought somebody was going to put me out there and people would be like calling and come in and, and yes, that happens, but that's only because you're out there doing the work to make those connections. And then when you come to work, you show up like a person that people want to work with again. Because I have gotten so many jobs off working with one director, and then I've been in shows with people who never worked again because they were terrible to work with, so it's a lot. And I think people need to realize it is a career. It's not just fun, it's work. It's called a play because we get to play, but it is not just all fun. And people think, oh my God, your life's so amazing. I can't count the times people say that to me. And then when I tell them what it cost me to do what I do in terms of my time and the emotional things you go through, rejection is real. Like you audition and you don't get it. And it's not like when you're in a small city and you audition and they call you and say why they didn't pick you, or we're sorry, but do it next time. When you go do an audition, if you don't hear anything, then you didn't get it. They don't, you don't get a courtesy call. Thanks for coming. Like, it's not like that. And I think people do think that. So anyway, but it's great. Like, I don't want to get people to not go into this field, but I want you to go in eyes wide open and really knowing. You have to be a self-starter. You have to be motivated, and you have to be tough. You have to be tough.
Yeah, that's a good point. Jodi, you mentioned someone asked a question in the Q&A. You mentioned the strike, and someone asked, do you think that those people who are going into professional acting, do you think that schools, universities, and colleges should include business classes and advocacy training as part of your training as a professional actor?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I believe at BW, and you can correct me, Colleen, if I'm wrong. I believe that they do teach a business of acting. I don't, and again, every teacher teaches something differently, but I think a lot of the business is always changing. Back when I graduated, it was like you would mail through the mail photos and resumes and all that stuff, and send people thank you cards and things like that for, inviting for coming to a show and things like that. So it's a little bit different. I think it can be helpful to just learn again how to be talking, how to be making those connections. And I think, again, and everybody comes from a different economic background and all of that. And some people graduate from a college, or they go to a city and they start working right away. But there are things that could be helpful as far as money management and retirement. Oh my gosh. I wish that, my parents, I just didn't come from a family that we didn't talk about it. I didn't know about a Roth IRA when I was 22 years old. I didn't know, I didn't think about that kind of thing. And I think that stuff like that just becomes a reality. You reach a certain age and you start thinking about those things. And I do think that things like that could be helpful in whether you are in a theater program and they say to take a business class, or to take an economics class, or learn how to invest, or whatever, try to save money. And it's hard because it's not always easy. Sometimes you don't have that extra $50 to put away every single month when you're living in an expensive city and all that. But I think things like that, to try to learn about those things now, while you're still young, learning about investing and retirement and things like that, because it gets real fast. And all of a sudden, even though I've worked for a really long time and I've earned a living and I'm earning a pension and all that stuff, which is a myth too, that people just think that it's not a real job or a real career. But it's like, I have a pension and health insurance and all that stuff. Like, I'm pretty lucky that I have that, but those things are possible. It's possible to be an actor or in the arts, and have those things. So I think I answered the question. I hope.
That's a good answer. So Colleen, this question is for you that came in through the Q&A. So the person says, if I'm thinking to play tennis seriously, the coach under whom I train is significantly important, and I might choose a college based on that coach. Do you advocate for the same thing for actors and performers? Is the coach or instructor more important than the actual program? So, we talked about looking into the faculty or the instructors' credentials or their history in the space. Is that more important than the program? Or maybe that is the program. Maybe that is what makes the program. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? I think if you have a teacher that you know of and you're excited to go study under, that makes a lot of sense. But when you're in
Mhm,
a program, just like any other college student, you don't have the same teacher for every class, not even for all
mhm,
your acting classes. You might have a head of a program who might teach your workshop class. For instance, that's what they call it at Baldwin Wallace, a workshop class. So they call it at Kent State as well. But that teacher may change every year.
mhm,
I was excited that I had a teacher who had studied at the Globe, and I wanted to do Shakespeare, and very few Americans have been invited to come study and perform at the Globe, and my teacher had. So that meant a lot to me. It carried a lot of weight, but it wasn't the only teacher I had. And one thing that people need to know about an acting program is that it's very diverse. So sometimes I have a teacher who will teach me one style of acting and another teacher who will teach me something else. One who's
mm,
going to teach me movement that's not dance, and then one who's going to teach me dance, a voice in terms of speaking and voice in terms of singing. So you have multiple different people feeding you different styles that you're putting together to match with your talent to build the actor you're going to be. So I
mm,
would not pick a school for one particular teacher, because
mhm,
that won't be your only teacher. But if you want an opportunity to study with them, I would see what else that program has to offer, because you will not be with the same person every year for everything. A program in musical theater or acting at all is very diverse. You're taking a lot of different methods of acting and styles and levels. And then they bring guest directors in. That's another thing to think
mm,
about. The program that I want to go to, are the directors outside people who are directing shows out in the world that I can work for when I graduate? Or are the shows only directed by, faculty? That makes a difference too. And so, you know, I hope I answered the question. I believe in having a teacher that you're really passionate about and wanting to work with. I just want to set a reality that you may get one class out of 4 years with that person. At
mhm.
best, you may get one class a year with that person. Um, and so I would not put it all on that particular one faculty member or one teacher or one coach, because that's not what it is.
I think that's a really good point. I think, and yes, you answered it perfectly, actually, because I think that the person asking was probably asking for a soundbite that they could share with, students or someone that might be looking at that. I want to be cognizant of time, and I've got two questions more, if that's okay. The one, and this might be a really quick answer, and Colleen, maybe this one's for you because you're teaching at BW right now in the program. There's so many programs out there to prep kids for auditions for these programs. And like summer intensives and those kinds of things. Do you think it's necessary? Are they critical? How do you view that? I'm guessing based on your response earlier, even about things like access, there's going to be kids that don't ever even know that those exist.
Right.
How do you feel when you have, is it necessary? Should parents or families be investing money in those kinds of programs and intensives?
I'm going to say yes and no, right? So next
Mhm.
week, I'm going to start teaching at Arts Bridge, which is a program for high schoolers who are thinking about theater. If you happen to be or have a high schooler who knows for sure theater is the direction that they want to go, and you want to give them their best shot at getting them into a top school, then I would say invest as you're able in these opportunities. Necessary? No, because I'm not really looking at your resume. I'm not looking at the resume of a 17-year-old. I may want to know if they've had some vocal training, if they've had some dance, if they've attended some classes, so I know if they're starting from scratch or if I can, where I need to place them. But I would say you're not excluded because you didn't do it from a program that understands access. Right.
Mhm.
There are some programs that don't care that not everybody can do it, and they only want the people who've had all this training. But it's also sometimes tricky, because if you overtrain your 18-year-old, by the time they get there, they're not really malleable. So I
Mhm.
would
That's a
say
good point.
if you're going to get them these kind of intensives, make sure that they are diverse experiences so that
Mhm.
they have a lot in their toolbox to pick from, and not so set in their ways that by the time they get to school, they can't do anything. But some of the things that they should be involved in the plays and the things that are going on at their school. They should try and do summer theater in the neighborhood that they live in. Some of those things aren't necessarily things that will cost you anything. The intensives can be they can be good. They make connections, they meet other kids like them. For me, that's the biggest value for those summer intensives. I mean, they get those classes and they get their whole new skills, but when you're a theater kid, it can sometimes be a little lonely. So when you go to these programs, you kind of get this community ahead of time and meet some people. But as you are able, absolutely. But necessary, absolutely not. Because again, we're looking for potential, not perfection.
And I like the term malleable, thinking about that the programs these university college programs are training program, they're teaching, and they don't expect kids. I say the same thing for my students who are interested in going to something like, for example, like visual arts, where they're looking and going into like an art program. And I tell them your portfolio doesn't need to be perfect, because then what are they going to teach you? Like they want to teach you the techniques, and they want to teach you some of those skills. So they want to just see that you have the potential and the drive and that you are somebody who can be trained to do those things. So I think that's really important. The last question that came in the Q&A was just about scholarships for college in terms of performing arts. And I can answer that really quickly. Yes, there are lots of audition-based scholarships for music, musical theater, a lot. It is so dependent on the school. Not every school offers them, but those that do, as long as you get into there, I would say make sure that the schools know that you exist, make sure that you're in their inquiry pool so that you can get information when they offer those auditions for scholarships, because sometimes they happen very early in the process, much earlier than students anticipate. It's not, and then they say, oh, I missed that. Well, you need to be on the radar earlier on. So definitely looking at that. So my very last question is, I would love to know what has been the highlight of your acting career up to this point, assuming you're not done. Jodi, what's been the highlight?
I have two. And I think the first one was when I was living in Los Angeles, and you don't think of LA as like a theater town, right? But I was cast in an original musical where that ended up, getting me, like, I had work right when I moved to LA and I met all these people. I was involved in originally creating parts in a show that was just brand new, that eventually went and workshopped in New York, and I got to go workshop it in New York. And, so that process was really cool, being able to originate a role in a show that went on to do some other things. And then I have to say, it was just recently, I just finished at Great Lakes Theater. I played Rosalind in As You Like It. And, I'm a music theater. I mean, I don't like to box, I think that's another thing I want to say. Like, I've been talking a lot from a conservatory point of view, like where my training was, but it is possible to work in all different areas of the business. And so I recently played Rosalind in As You Like It, which was an incredibly rewarding and wonderful experience, just a wonderful role with great people at my artistic home, which is Great Lakes Theater. I'm a core company member there. So it was just a really great thing to be like, yeah, I was this music theater kid, and now I'm like, playing these amazing, incredible roles in Shakespeare. And so I would say that those were the two most fun highlights.
Those are great.
Yeah.
Colleen, what's your highlights?
And Jodi, she was amazing in that show. I'm a Shakespeare lover, and I hardly ever get to do it. And to see one of my closest friends up there, just, oh my gosh, she's amazing. It's weird. So mine kind of shifts a bit. I just closed Ain't Misbehaving at Great Lakes, which I wasn't even supposed to be in. I kind of got roped in to replace somebody. And I just happened to be a part of a cast that was extraordinary. And they had already done it. It was a remount, so I got thrown in. The reason why I mention it as a highlight is because it was one of my dream shows to do. And here I am living in Cleveland, working a day job, and this opportunity comes. And it was amazing. And the people that I met from it, I mean, it was just so fun and joyous, and I love it. So I always have a new highlight every time I talk to someone. But I really loved doing that. And also, whenever I get to do a play, in grad school, I played Mrs. Hardcastle and She Stoops to Conquer. And it was the most ridiculous thing. I had a wig that was 3 feet high with a bird in it. And I would rub the bird. I mean, it was outrageously fun because I like to do things that are ridiculous as well. But I cannot tell you the people that stop me on the street all around Ohio and say, I remember you in that, so, those were here. I mean, I toured nationally. I've lived in New York. I've done it all. I love those. Those were fun. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that.
But we're not done yet. We got more to add.
Yes, you are not done yet. So, well, I am excited to see you both in productions in the future. I've seen you both since high school in productions, and like I said, I can proudly say I knew you when, that kind of. I did not obviously follow. My kids would say I'm theatrical at home, but
we were cheerleaders together, Christina and I.
We were as well. Yes. See that.
So we go way back. We go way back.
We do go way back. I know. Yes, a lot of, we could sit on, yes, lots of fun stories. We won't share those today, but again, I'm so thankful that you both spent the time tonight. I think you shared some amazing tidbits, and just like I said, even little sound bites that I think are so helpful for students who are thinking about careers in this space and some of the reality of it. So, and again, like you said, Colleen, not to scare people, but there's highs and there's lows, it's not all roses all the time. And I think that there's things that students should be thinking about in high school, but also knowing that there's all these different pathways, there's different ways to approach this profession. It's not everyone going in this very linear way to become a stage actor. So again, I'm super appreciative of you taking time. I know you guys are both fairly busy. I'm sure you have lots of exciting things to do on this evening, but thanks for everybody for watching and live and the recording, and best of luck to all of your thespians who are looking to move into the space, and parents. I hope that you are encouraging to your kids, like Jodi mentioned, that she was encouraged to move into this space and had supportive parents. So I think that's a really important thing. We work with a lot of parents, and I think that belief in your children and what they can do is one of the best ways that you can support them. So everyone, have a great evening, and thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye.